Finally.
What's going on?
Not much. Southern Comic Geek, SEG. We've been talking about this forever, man.
Yeah, and it's funny because and I guess we'll probably get into this a little bit later, but Valiant's one of those crapped on title lines with a bunch of great IP that I think a bunch of people gloss over on. So
My honestly, my favorite IP in the times when we grew up. I mean, it's funny because when you and I hang out, we always kind of geek about what each other picked up and whatnot. And I feel like sometimes we're in our bubble, but then when you start hearing and seeing people listen to us or chime in, you realize there's way more fans than just us.
sure. Yeah, there's got to be more people than me that has as many copies of Turok #1 as I do. I've got 200 plus copies of Turok #1.
You have 200 copies?
Mm-hmm. There's a old IG picture of me on Turok Day, and I've got them all laying on top of me, and you can just see my eyes. And my wife took the picture, and a watcher of the channel, a viewer of the channel, made a mug out of it. I should have got my wife to put my coffee in that mug, but it's got the Turok 1 cover with me on there. So,
what is that called? Like, can I find it online?
What's that?
Your Turok Day picture.
I will look it up because
I don't see it, but it'll be kind of cool to show.
Oh well, I mean, I post fairly frequently on IG, so and IG is where I threw it at. But
wow, that's insane.
Yeah, and so yeah, there's the class picture for Valiant from Bob Layton that Bob Layton did for me.
Oh, so cool.
Yeah, so all the VH1 characters.
That's what I screwed up on. I kind of hesitated. I thought I'd be able to get Bob to do something for me at OAX last year, and then he was just too busy, and he didn't really want to draw when he was there anymore. And so, I will definitely do a pre-show next time.
Well, and talking about OAX, you can tell me because you were there last year, and I've already purchased my tickets, and I'm going to be there this year. So last year, Bill said it was okay for people to bring comics to get signed because I'm still one of those weirdos to get my comics signed too.
Sure.
And so, was there a lot of that going on there? Or?
I don't think there was a ton, but I did see some, myself included. I actually brought a couple books from Batman and Robin for Simone DeMio to sign, and he ended up doing remarks for me.
Oh.
And then what was cool was then the CGC witnesses were there. But yeah, I don't think it's frowned upon. I think there's still a good amount of comic fans.
Okay, because I've got several books that I'd like to get Bob to sign because I commissioned him through the email to get that done, and we got a lot of folks here in the chat. We got Las Cruces from New Mexico, one of the avid supporters of all things comic book YouTube. Nice. The Agu Rhythm, all the way from the northwest part of the country, and Diego, all the way from Brazil, who loves to see my art. I don't show it enough, and so he's always wanting to do one of the haul videos where we show the art. So,
yeah. Speaking of showing art, I mean, we have a pretty simple agenda today. We thought today would be kind of like our starter, why we love Valiant stream, and I think one, we're going to share a bit of our personal story, like what we came across, why we love Valiant, and obviously we'll just be scratching the surface today. And then number two, we've had a few friends, including Noel, who was like, man, where do I start? Right? Like they're asking there's so much. And, we thought today would be a good day to kind of give a mini where to start guide as well. And then the last thing is you and I both had some new pickups that, we could share today. So yeah, we will be sharing some fun art today and hopefully get you guys looped in to our love for Valiant. So SCG, where do we start from here? Like, what was your story? Like, how did you fall in love with Valiant?
So the strange thing about Valiant is, and I think I'm 46, so I figure we're about the same age.
We're exactly the same age.
So, so during that time going to the comic shop, there's a lot of stuff going on, obviously, with the big two. Well, there's so much history with the big two at that point, right? And if you're just at that age group and you're starting to kind of crank up, you've had multiple crises over at DC. You've had multiple soft reboots. and stuff with Marvel, like what do? You have to go back and get the handbook and try to steady up, and becomes more of a chore. Well, then you have this exciting new universe launch that you can get in at ground zero at, right? And so all these characters were being drawn by people you were used to reading over there at Marvel and or DC, or looking at their stuff. It was a very easy on the eyes art style. What's up, Daymares? Another Valiant guy right there. And thank you, Augie Rhythm, for the 99-cent super chat.
Nice.
So yeah, so it was very easy on the eyes, and the storytelling was there. I'm always been a big reader. And the thing that kind of cemented me was when Rye died fighting Mother God. I'm like, oh wow, okay, he died, but then he ends up staying dead. And then with the launch of kind of Rye and the Future Force, which was one of my more favorite titles during that time. Yeah, I just picked up all things Valiant. So, and then of course the Acclaim days, yuck. But then with
I forgot all about that. I mean, I think Acclaim was what made me leave Valiant.
Oh my word! So Ninjak, going from Ninjak being like Shazam, you say Ninjak and he turns into the ninja. I mean, it was just so horrible. But there were bits and pieces that Dinesh would end up taking when he relaunched Valiant, and so the new Valiant stuff. I mean, as true as you could stay to the old stuff and still be like new and vibrant. So it was great too. So it's a storytelling. And Rob Liefeld on his Robservations podcast likened it to Image was like the more stylized guys. We didn't really have the story. Valiant had the story.
Yeah.
And the art was not like knock it out of the park like a Jim Lee type of an art on most books. Obviously you had BWS and others that were killing it. But sometimes it's not about hitting the home runs. It's about not losing the game.
Yeah,
because I've read some great stories and the art was just horrible, and it just kind of drowned the stories. But that's my long excuse, or my long Valiant story. What's yours?
Well, mine was a little different. I mean, I think some things that you mentioned, I definitely connect. I remember the Rye moment. That moment was like really like heartbreaking. You're like, whoa, what the heck? He like sacrificed himself, and I remember that. But I don't think that was the moment that got me into it. I felt like I read Rye and some of those books later, because I remember Harbinger being the one that stood out, because it kind of reminded me of X-Men. And I remember like I didn't buy Valiant comics right away. I felt like I would flip through them when I see them, and it was unavoidable, right? Because I still remember like Harbinger 1 and 2, and like once you start seeing the certain titles be consistently on the stands, you start getting curious, and people are talking about it, chattering about it. And so I remember the book that really got me was Archer and Armstrong Zero. Like when that came out, for some reason, like I gravitated toward it. And I think a couple of the stories, there were like little moments too that caught me. I felt like Harbinger was cool because it was like a bit of a teen drama, right? Like there's teen drama, there was teen pregnancy, like, and I was like, wow, like you could go there with comics. It's very real and grounded situations. And then the other thing I also really liked was then I moved over to Archer and Armstrong, even though we mentioned Barry Windsor Smith having obviously very different art style as like David Latham and Bob Lane and a lot of these guys. There was like a house style that was established too, right? And I don't know if that was because of the color or whatever. Everything felt so consistent, and so when they started showing things about like showing how the world connects, you kind of really believe it because they really did set a good groundwork. But it was Archer and Armstrong Zero, and a lot of it had to do with Archer. His little backstory was his parents are like ministers.
Yeah, really.
My parents are ministers, and so from within the church, the business of church, I was able to witness a lot of like just funny stuff. My parents, God bless them, have always been super pure, super like righteous, but all around them there was always this funny stuff happening. And so Archer and Armstrong.
Okay, well, I was going to ask. I mean, wait a minute now. You likened it to that, and I remember the story in Zero where he walks in on his dad. It's like,
Yeah,
whoa.
I never walked on my dad, but I hear about stuff. I'll hear
Oh,
about
okay,
stuff,
okay.
of like, people just being criminals and all that stuff. And so it was crazy when I saw that. I was like, whoa, I was like, you could have that in a comic? And instantly just really connected with me. And I feel like, you know, I've written this out there before where ever since I think Archer Armstrong was like my like really starting point when it comes to Valiant because it became so personal to me and it kind of inspired my life because I've always been like, I my parents are immigrants, not only immigrants but like immigrants within a church bubble. So I never was prepared for college. I was never prepared for the world. No one in I don't think anyone my adults in my life ever asked me what I want to do. I literally just had to kind of figure it out. And so I literally like as a teenage kid like met an Armstrong and like followed him around and he was like a weirdo and brought me into like got me in trouble. But then I met another Armstrong. I kind of then I met like Gilead. I met all the like different characters in this world, and that's kind of why I've always had like a really soft spot for Valiant. It just it really sucked me in. So that's my
Well,
little story.
the storytelling was kind of edgy for the time, but it wasn't like overtly like get you real bad trouble with
Yeah.
the powers that be. I mean, you think about Mother God's suit for a prepubescent boy, you're
Dude,
just like, hey,
it was no, it was cool, and it was stuff like that. It was so provocative because don't get me wrong, like they're like the original like creators of MILF because it was like
yeah.
a weird like him
And this
her and her child. It was
that
weird.
that story is like, I mean, when you go back and I went back and read it again, and I'm like, whoa, this is
Yeah,
like intense. And so again goes back to the storytelling, and
yeah.
the art certainly helped it along. And I think Barry Windsor Smith, because you look at some of David Lapham's and Gonzalo Amayo's inks,
Mm.
or even Leighton, like a lot of Leighton, you just like put side by side with Barry Windsor Smith. I mean, it's kind of that established that house art style. Of course, Marcus asked if we cut away the coupons. Me personally, I thought that was sacrilegious, Marcus, and so no, I would never do something like that. I barely opened X Force One to even read it.
I did. I did cut away the coupons. In fact, it's funny. I was telling Jason I pulled out whatever books I could, and one of them, I don't know which one it was, I had a mark that said no coupon. There you go, no coupons. So I thought it's hilarious. And I used to always write these little labels on all my books. So I don't know. Do you remember what coupon this was?
Was that for Harbinger Zero?
This is Magnus. Flip this book for Rye #1.
Yep, Rise first
Oh,
appearance.
was this Rye's first appearance?
Yeah,
Oh, look at that. They brought us to the strip joint.
I know. There's a page not too far into that book. That one right there, that second page that Dan Moeller was just selling on eBay not too long ago.
That's hilarious. It's so funny.
Daymare corrects me and says Magnus Zero was that coupon. So there you go.
So then, what was this coupon then?
That's what I'm saying. That one would have been for Magnus Zero.
Oh, Magnus Zero. Okay, got it. So was there a reason why Magnus had no hair? Do you remember?
I know that at one point they ended up they cut into his head for something. He got injured or something like that early on. And so he went around with the do-rag for a little while, but he quickly grew his hair back. Fortunately for him, not all of us can do that.
So I gotta ask too. Do you remember who was first? Was it Valiant that did this kind of flip? Well, I guess it was Marvel Comic Presents. But between Valiant and Image, do you remember who was first? Because Image, I think, did this too with Youngblood.
Yeah, they did with Youngblood, and I would guess that Valiant came out a little bit before the Image books, but somebody's free to correct me on that. But Valiant, that's the other thing. The first chromium cover, Valiant.
Oh yeah,
right. First wood cover, first glass cover. I mean, you talking about gimmicks? That Valiant had, its fair share of them. With the coupon cutting out of the coupon. Which would force people to buy multiple copies if they were wanting to get keep one in mint condition. Behind me are all books that are signed by various artists. The Valiant deal, the carbon fiber, first carbon fiber cover by Bloodshot or by Valiant rather, is up there. First leather cover. I don't know about first leather, but it is leather.
When was this? I don't remember the leather, the wood cover.
So this is what's referred more VE1, so like the Dinesh era forward.
Oh, okay.
And so I don't know if I'm spoiling anything for those that are in the chat, but that there is someone who had mentioned a certain book that they were attached to and got them hooked on Valiant and was able to secure a certain cover to said book.
Really interesting.
Yeah. You know anybody like
that? we could go there at some point. We could definitely go there at some point. I didn't prepare that, by the way.
Oh, okay.
Here, but I'll definitely bring it out at some point because there's a lot to be said there as well. I definitely feel like that's a deep cut. We should do that. We should do the Holy Grail show and tell. Like what's our piece, right?
So Diego, yes, I am actually in my comic room tonight because it had all this up here, and so I decided to be fitting for our Valiant talk. Daymers does confirm that it was 2012 onward, so that's the Dinesh era. And Daymers has, as I understand it, quite a bit of Valiant art himself. So.
No, he does. I mean, we're gonna have to invite him to join us on one of these talks.
Yeah, him. Another one would be Brian Wells. Do you know Brian?
Does he have a website like neat stuff or something like that?
He does sell comics like at shows. He lives in California and like.
Wrong Brian. Then.
Okay,
this guy's in New York.
Yeah, AKA Comic Web or Shadow Sip. I've seen his stuff. But yeah, so he has quite a bit of stuff himself, and went to the Bloodshot premiere. Dinesh invited him over there to the premiere and all that kind of good stuff, which is another story altogether. But there's several different. And the other kind of nice thing about collecting Valiant art, unless you get into like where I play checkers. Carl plays chess. Okay, so
I don't play chess.
So, but unless you're talking about like that early, like Unity, pre-Unity stuff, most of the stuff is fairly affordable to get, right? Comparatively to say like a Marvel page. But I'm more of a page collector than I'm a cover collector. I did secure that other page that I showed you that they took one panel from. So it is on its way to me.
Okay.
So I actually talked to Dave Kopecki last night.
Yeah, I saw that Wildstorm Rising.
Yeah, so I didn't get that.
You get that? Who got that?
I don't know, but it flew off there pretty quickly.
Oh my god, that was so awesome! I didn't know Dave was into Valiant or even Bear Windsor Smith image stuff.
He's raising money for specific purpose, and so I said, well, I don't see it on there yet, but there's some Valiant pages I'd be interested in.
Really?
And he goes, well, wasn't planning on getting rid of them, but tell me which ones. So he has the page after the Rye page I have, where Japan falls. And then he has the page before my Shadow Man versus Solar during the Unity saga, when Shadow Man saves Mother God, which essentially you can people do Rodimus Prime for Optimus's death. They could blame Shadow Man for Rye's death because he saved Mother God from Solar whooping her butt.
So SDG, what are your top three? Like Well, we'll share. Maybe we'll share our top three, and then maybe we'll transition into like where people can start reading. And then you want to do the art at the end, or you want to do opposite? Or you want to do art first, and then
we can do art at the end, whichever.
Yeah, cool, awesome. So what's the top three? If you were to think like, not even thinking about top three.
So we're talking about books or characters.
What do you think? Titles, books, characters.
Well, the books can hold a lot of characters. So, like if you said Ride in
Yeah,
the Future Force, that's a bunch of them, right?
that's true. That's true. Well,
But
it's fine. That's like a title. It's fine. We can talk title or characters, group or team.
and so I'm assuming that
Secret
we're talking.
weapons. Secret weapons.
Okay.
That's a team. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's funny because when well, there was like a short-lived Secret Weapons series in the Dinesh era, but they renamed it Unity. The superhero team's named Unity. So
Got it.
Kenneth Bird, what's going on? So so yeah, so the probably if I'm talking about VH1 stuff from back in the day,
yeah,
it's going to be Ride in the Future Force, Bloodshot, and kind of want to say Solar, but I'm going to have to go with EXO.
Okay. Yeah, EXO is usually people's number ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, if you now, it got a little wonky as a lot of 90s comics did, towards the end. But if you read Robert Vendetti's, which would be, I guess, volume 3 of EXO, which he did issues 1 through 50, that is like, if you want to learn how to develop a character from start to finish, like that's a masterclass because, which helps to have the same writer, helps to have, decent artists on the title. But, you took Eric from being like a barbarian, essentially what they call Conan in an Iron Man suit, right?
Yeah.
And take him from that to, a king, that does what he needs to help his people and is willing to, make the sacrifice play, right? So definitely a recommended read for those who have not read it. But what would be your top 3?
Yeah, I mean, just hearing you speak too, we should definitely have Dinesh come on and join us and talk about his thought process with those 50 issues. We should definitely have Sean come on and talk about his Riot and the Future Force experience. Because honestly, it was really touching. Like when my team saw the video of him looking at your page and like talking about it.
Yeah,
I felt like the girls on my team were like kind of like, oh, dude, it was like it's such a moment, right? I felt like it was cool.
that was great of you, and I posted it on my IG, which got quite a few impressions there, and I was standing there, and he just kept going on and on. I just assumed he would look at it and say, "Yeah, I remember this page," sign it like that, but he just really got into it.
I kind of recorded thinking he would just be signing it and giving it back to you. And he just got into it. I felt like he just like got really focused and like started like time traveling. He started like going through life.
Which is one of the fun things. I mean, you get that a little bit with certain books that writers or artists do, but with the art page, because there's only one of them.
Yeah.
When you take them back and they're like, whoa, because a lot of them can tell you, hey, I remember this about this, and, just kind of go down memory lane. It's really interesting.
Yeah. No, and what's special is, if you think about it, like people, a lot of people don't know this, but now that I've gotten to know the publishing game a little bit more, artists spend like 1 to 3 days with that. That's a lot with each page. That's a lot of time, It's literally like if you and I sat together in a porch somewhere, having some drinks and having cigars for 3 days, that would be like there'll be a lot of memories created there.
Sure.
So like you can only imagine, oh man, on one page, right? And spending that kind of time. And the last person we should invite is Kevin Van Hook, who created Bloodshot. We should definitely have him come chat.
So Kevin, I reached out to Kevin. He did me a Hulk 181 homage with Eternal Warrior and Archer and Armstrong. And
what? Dude, you have to show that. Where is that?
Yeah, sketch cover. And he signed my Bloodshot 1. So I had to send him the blank sketch cover. I said, if I send you a couple of other books, will you sign them too, since you got to send it back? And he said, yeah. So this is the one he signed for me. Nice. And at Baltimore, I got Bob Wyachek to sign.
Nice. But, you're just missing Barry Windsor.
Don't remind me. I do have a Barry Windsor Smith signature, though. It's on Archer Armstrong 0 gold.
What? How? Yeah. Did you buy a secondary or you got it from Barry Windsor himself?
Ironically enough, I don't know. Christian goes by Elvine's Comics on Instagram.
I don't.
Big Valiant guy. So he said, and this is how he explains the difference between Valiant and his other stuff. He goes, I read everything. I collect Valiant.
Interesting.
And
Wow.
so he's been on board since the VH1, big buddies with Dinesh. I got it from him. So
Wow.
it
That's
come out of
cool.
his collection. That carbon fiber bloodshot up there, it came out of his collection too. So we worked out a trade.
That's cool. I'm gonna have to check those out one day. I don't know if Dinesh do have some of those in his inventory, but yeah, he actually has a lot of stuff. But just to I guess to answer your question, and also as kind of a commentary on checkers and chess, I feel like you have such a, a wider breadth of understanding of the whole like Valiant universe and cycle. I feel like when I think Valiant is really just VH1. Like that's my nostalgia. And that's kind of why I have a more limited pool of stuff I could collect from. So I could only imagine if I follow Valiant like you did, I'd be like kid in a candy store too, because there's so much stuff, right? And so I think that's the only reason our collecting is a little different. And so I think it's cool because for me, I look forward to learning more about the Valiant universe and even just that 50 issues of EXO. I'm gonna dive into. But for me, the top three would be Archer and Armstrong, straight up, just like no brainer. Uh, weirdest thing is, I think number two is probably Shadow Man.
Okay.
I think the reason Shadow Man always appealed to me is because ever since I was a kid, I always say comic books saved my life because I didn't know the culture, I didn't know the language, and I really learned, how to live in America through comics. And for some reason, I always like I swear like until I was maybe 19 years old, I thought I was a superhero, and I literally felt like I was living on a mission. I could be a superhero one day, whatever, right? And I don't know what that means, but Shadow Man was like, man, I could be a Shadow Man one day, like in the back of my mind. And I think that was like very close to me. And I would say third would be Eternal Warrior, but
Okay.
only because of Master Dark. Like it's weird. There was always
Yeah.
something about Master Dark that was like really like provocative to me. He's always naked. He has tattoos all over.
Him
He's
and
just
his
creepy.
sister, kind
Yeah,
of
his
weird.
sister thing. It's like, yeah, it's weird. He always kind of like made me feel uncomfortable, coming from like a very like, Christian family, like religious background. I was kind of like, oh, this guy, oh man. And because of that, I he was always one of my favorites. And
Yeah.
I kind of learned to embrace that, right?
Well,
But
Eternal Warrior was a great title, and I think I mentioned this to Stingray was that uh, it if you like the Highlander series, like especially the television series back in the day,
yeah.
there was a lot of those kind of vibes, especially the further you got into the run on
Yeah.
Eternal Warrior, where he would have those flashbacks where he would go and he was doing this, and then it would bring it back, and then the history and the other would catch up with each other. So. But
Yeah.
yeah, we got Austin LeMay, which great artist in the YouTube community here in the chat. Do appreciate you for stopping by. And
Yo.
Daymares also says I have. He says he has to say Sean is one of his favorite Valiant artists. So there you
Nice.
go.
I agree.
And,
Sean's amazing.
and so I tell you what, you mentioned this earlier, and I didn't want to interrupt you, but for those who might be watching on my channel and are not as familiar with 24/7. I know that you just wrapped up, or did I see that y'all reopened the Kickstarter, or what?
Yeah, so we literally had a bunch of folks. Well, first of all, 24/7 Comics, we're a creator led publishing company, and our whole thing is really about partnering with creators, telling the stories they want to tell, and doing the art they want to do. So we exercise a thing called partnership publishing, and what's been fun is I've been able to work alongside Sean on one of his books called Evermind, and then most recently, is Zero Ghosts was our last campaign, and we work with Pledge Manager to fulfill it, and you have to fill these surveys out. And the opportunity Pledge Manager gives you is to reopen it for a week. And so for those who are stragglers and missed out, they could actually order for that week. And the reason we did that was surprisingly, there was a ton of people that emailed us after and said, "Oh, I was planning to pledge, but I didn't pledge. So like, what can we do?" And I was like, "Oh, okay, let's just open it for a week." I'm not a fan of like keeping it ongoingly open because I do feel like then those who were there first not being rewarded. So we just said, all right, let's just open it for a week and see what happens. So we're seeing them come in now. So if you haven't had a chance to check out 247comics.com, definitely appreciate you guys
We'll
checking it out.
drop that link in the chat. That way, anybody that's watching on my channel can
Oh yeah,
click on it. Because yeah, I've got a 24/7 package heading my way. Hopefully, very soon.
yeah, very soon. And I think we just ended like 3 weeks ago, and so next week is when fulfillment will begin. And I think by the third or fourth week, everyone should have all their packages. So it'll be a
Yep.
fun thing.
So there was an art tier, and so I was lucky enough to get into the art tier and got some
Nice.
Star Wars art heading my way.
It'll be fun. I'm gonna reach out to everyone personally, actually, let everyone kind of select what they want when it comes to the art tier. But it'll be a fun one. All right, so let's pivot. Let's get into what's the best way to start reading. I think for me, like I mentioned, I had a very kind of specific memory of Valiant, but I do have some of the books here. I don't know if we want to reference these books here, or maybe just go by memory. But yeah, there's a lot of ways to start reading when it comes to Valiant.
Yeah, and it depends on if you want to go back and kind of get the OG stories. So, like, if you want to go back to the OG stories and see where it all really started at, certainly you can do so. There's many trades. Certainly would definitely suggest up through and shortly after Unity, even up to the what's the chaos effect. But so great stuff, fantastic artist. Now, if you want to do more of a modern take, so the original Valiant started with the Gold Key characters, Solar, Turok, and Magnus. So when Dinesh got bought the IP for Valiant, long story short, he was not able to secure those three characters, so he had to rebuild the world in a different way. And so minus those characters, obviously. And so, but this is in a much more modern take. You'll see bits and pieces. If you go back and read all the VH1 and then the VH2 or like the Acclaim stuff, you'll see bits and pieces of all those origin stories in the V1 stuff. Should you pay attention to Gold Key Comics? Similarly to the VH1, it wouldn't hurt. But you don't have to really know that stuff to be able to start on Solar 1 as an example. Turok was introduced in a Magnus comic, but
so Solar, Magnus, and then Turok.
Yeah, Turok was introduced in the Magnus. You had it. There you go.
That's fine. All right. So these were the three that kind of kick things off for them. Do you remember the stories? Because I actually don't remember Magnus much. Dinesh is a huge fan of Magnus. Solar, I remember a little bit more. To me, he kind of reminds me of like Dr. Manhattan from Watchmen. But what was the context of Turok showing up here?
So this is like he crosses over into the Lost Land, and then that's when he meets Turok.
Got it. Okay.
Of course, then a few issues later, when you're talking about Unity, there's Turok again, but he's teamed up with Mother God. And of course, then they have the fight in Archer and Armstrong #2. Yep. So he goes in this cave or something, and he comes upon this land where Turok and Andar are. So Andar is his partner in crime from the Gold Key days. So then when Unity goes away and they're thrust through time, they get separated. So Turok shows up. He's young in modern day times, whereas Andar had been transferred back earlier in time. So Turok ends up teaming up with Andar's grandson instead of his son. So it creates a slightly different dynamic.
What's up, Carl?
What's up? Non-Carl XXX.
Yeah, the other Carl. Carl S. and Carl X.
Yeah. So the lovely illustrated Archer and Armstrong #2 by Barry Windsor Smith, with the Walt Simonson cover, connecting cover, as it were. Now, the Unity covers were all connecting, both the first part and the second part. The first part were done by legendary creator Frank Miller. The second ones were by Walt Simonson, another legendary creator.
This is Walt right here?
Yep.
Wow, I forgot that he actually dude, there's so many big names that was on this, right?
So the story, according to Jim Shooter, that was told to me, how he got Walt Simonson and to do the covers was basically he told them, said, look, Frank did the first set of covers. He doesn't want to do the second set. Would you do the second set? And he said, I can't pay you what Marvel's paying you. He said, well, what did Frank Miller make? So he told him, he said, as long as you pay me 1 penny more than Frank Miller, I can say I've made more than Frank Miller on a project. I'm good. And so he did the 8 covers, rather.
Dang, I forgot. I didn't know that. Actually, I think at the time I was probably still learning English, to be honest. So I wasn't tracking the creators at all. I think I always go back to Barry Windsor Smith because similar to Master Dark, he always kind of made me go, oh, and I think that's kind of what attracted me to Barry Windsor Smith's art. But that's hilarious.
Yeah, so that's the issue that I've got a Barry Windsor Smith page out of.
Which one? Do you remember?
Yeah, it's the keep going.
Well, real quick before we keep going, when we talked about Mother God, Erica Pierce, look at this provocative costume, she's basically naked.
Yeah. So the other day I was searching online. There is the old paper dolls where you could pin the clothes on the paper dolls.
Yeah.
Okay. There's a Mother God one that Barry Windsor Smith did. She's butt naked, and you pin the clothes on her. It's out there on the internet.
What the heck?
Yeah. So nice little cameo by EXO there as he's fighting the dino.
That's so cool. He just flies through the wall, and then they're like, "What the heck?" And then he just runs out the other side. I totally remember this. It was
so the Unity. I mean, a lot of the panels end up being like Rise Death is actually in Solar 2, and it's so it's a stat on some pages and the real art on the other. So it gets a little tricky collecting the art to make sure it's not like that scene right there where Rai is fighting against the robots. That scene's in multiple issues. And so depending on when it was actually done as to whether or not, and it doesn't look like Barry Windsor Smith, so it leads me to believe it's probably a stat on that original page, whoever owns that one.
It's so cool because if you think about back then, they must have had so much fun with this. Because nowadays we're all virtual, right?
Right.
But back then, imagine them having a pin wall. They have different panels and almost like doing an animation movie. They kind of did something similar. And I could totally imagine how much fun they had assembling everything. And as a reader, when you come across, not even unconsciously, panels that you've seen before, it really interconnects the world for you, really organically.
Yeah, for sure. And the colors were so vibrant. I mean, you think about every time Solar used his powers and stuff. Yeah. So yeah, I think
it's been 30 years. Look at these pages; they look beautiful. I just remember opening up. They just feel like comic books. They just felt nice,
Yeah, it was a step up. I mean, you think about the price. See, that's how they connected right there.
Oh yeah, I remember this. I totally remember this now.
But yeah, so they were a price up. They were pricier than what the Marvel versions were. So
does anyone own these covers? These Simonson covers? Oh, he kept them.
Oh, I imagine so, but or I don't know. Walt keeps his stuff unless the inker ends up with it.
Yeah, I think so. I think he typically keeps everything. This is kind of wild. Back then, I remember Wizard played a huge role as well because I felt like Wizard served as a promotional guide for Image and Valiant, and it really kind of brought the world together.
Oh yeah, for sure.
The promo.
Yeah, turn the next page right there.
Here's an example.
Right there. That's the page I got.
Oh yeah, I've seen that before. That's a great page.
Yeah,
I like the page a lot. That's a
it's
great page.
actually exchanged hands multiple times over the last little while, and it's one of those stories that, hey, if you don't get it the first time, just be patient,
Yeah,
and you might end up getting it. So it turns out that the person that ended up with it wanted to sell it, offload it for something else, and I was able to wait them out and pay what they paid for it because obviously they wanted to make a little bit of money on it. So.
sure. No, this is a great page. Congrats on that. I didn't know you had it. I remember seeing someone having it, and then it was on sale, and then it was gone already by the time I reached out. But that's a great page.
Well, Barry Windsor did a lot of what he called enhanced inks. We're
Okay.
going back and re-inking that stuff. I mean, look at that. I don't know if that's the image that they used for the chromium card for Turok or not, but it
Which
looks
one? This
really,
one on the
yeah,
right? I don't
looks
remember.
really close to the.
It's super familiar, right? This one looks very
Mhm.
familiar.
Yeah, I've got multiple sets of the Unity cards, and so the art is
Whoa! I forgot about those. I have a couple sealed boxes of those somewhere.
Yeah, so I did a box break because you can get the boxes
Yeah,
fairly inexpensively, but so a lot of those images were reused on the cards,
that's cool.
front and back. So yeah,
So how about this too? Like, is it weird? Like, I mean, does this happen anymore? Because I just felt like it was such a like such a community. Like the industry was such a community where they kind of support each other. Because this is a Dark Horse comic advertisement in a Valiant comic. Like, how did that work?
yeah. Well, I mean, it's the big two versus everybody else, right?
That's true. Yeah,
And
that's
and
kind of cool.
then eventually, I mean, you got Image, Valiant, Dark Horse, even with the Star Wars license. I mean, you got those guys, all fighting for part number three.
Such a great idea. And it's crazy as I'm flipping through these pages. Look, all these like advertisements too. They were really good about, making sure you know about all the other titles, which I don't think happens as much anymore. I feel like they're just all the different like offices are kind of working on their own titles in the big
That's right.
two. But here it felt like they were all working in the same office, and having a great time.
Well, and yeah, so that's the Jim Shooter, right? He's keeping a tight ship. It is a slippery slope for sure. And
Right.
yeah, and Damaris makes a great point because a lot of them had crossovers. I mean, you think about Predator versus Magnus. There's a Barry Windsor Smith cover. Shut up.
Porter Tide.
He doesn't believe that. If you believe
Hater,
that,
hater.
if you believe that, if you believe that, there's a Barry Windsor Smith page and from Unity. I mean, from Death Deathmate, and then there's also a Bart Sears page from EXO that you need to get rid of, Scott.
Oh yeah, definitely get rid of all that.
But
Hardcore
yeah, so
Valiant.
yeah, there's a Barry Windsor Smith cover of him fighting against the Predator. Pretty
Yeah,
dope.
I saw this page somewhere too. Someone owns this page.
Yep.
I thought it was
Is
super
it
fun.
Justin or JB?
Yeah, somebody, someone owns this. Hardcore was
Yeah.
interesting.
Oh yeah.
I mean, they were what? They were basically going after the Harbingers. I forgot.
Yeah. So they had all the Harbinger powers, but they were like from implants, and so basically this program put these implants in there to go after Harada and the other Psiots, which were what they called mutants in the Harbinger
And then
storyline.
who were the Psy Lords?
The Psilords were from the future, so
Were, were they related to Hardcore, or are they toy?
they are the future version of Hardcore. So
Ah,
like in Raya and the Future Force, you
yeah.
got a future version of Gilead. You've got Solar the Destroyer shows up
Mhm.
at one point.
Okay.
Um,
Who is a futuristic Solar, right?
no, Solar the Destroyer is like at one point he has a personality split off, and he
Oh
has the
yeah.
Destroyer. So if you remember Valiant Vision, where you had 3D glasses. A lot of those were actually Solar the Destroyer.
I remember. I actually do own the cover where he splits.
Ah.
Yeah, the
And
Quesada cover.
so
Yeah,
the Valiant Vision comic that has Solar on the front of it's a Neil
yeah.
Adams cover.
It is. That's crazy. We're gonna have to pull those up at some point. So talking about kick-ass ads, this was kind of cool too. I don't remember this, but I thought it's cool how they, not only used the covers for 0 and 1 for advertising, they also created like custom advertising. Who drew this? Is it Perlin? Don Perlin. Oh,
Yeah.
rest in peace, Don Perlin.
Yep, just recently passed.
Yeah, it's really sad. And then baseball card, obviously. I mean, man, so cool. I remember a lot of video game advertisements as well, but I loved just the way they were assembled back then.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And the Image Valiant crossover, that's like a victim of missed deadlines, right? I mean, because it had all the promise in the world. It had the story writer, you had the storytellers, both their writing and artistry, and they just couldn't get their deadlines. So the one, I forget which colors were which, but basically some of the colors were the Image guys, some of the colors were the Valiant, headed by the Valiant guys. And the Image ones never could bring their stuff, like Rob Liefeld and all them. They never could.
Oh man, that's unfortunate. Wait, was it a flip book too? I don't remember. Oh no,
No.
I mean, the quality of these books were really good. Like the cover is like a cardstock, and then they definitely upgraded when it comes to the paper itself. It's a bit of a more semi-gloss, I would say, but the color is still really boom, dude. Like opening these books is bringing me back like crazy, because just feeling them and seeing how like Barry's lines are so powerful, right?
Oh yeah, and that's Jim Lee inks, dude.
Yeah, Barry's lines and Jim Lee's inks. It's so crazy.
So when else did that ever happen?
I don't know if it did happen outside of this book. Wow.
So yeah, Solar has another personality split for this storyline, and he hooks up with the Void, which causes their worlds to collide.
We should ask Shaheen to join us as well. Shaheen actually owns this page.
Oh wow.
Yeah, which is a really beautiful page.
Yeah. Scott, you on the page on the left? Yeah, he owns the one on the left. Scott does.
Scott does, and it's funny. I reached out to him, I think early on, just to talk about the page, and he was like, "This is like one of the moments he remembers." And having this being the only moment that the whole Homage Studios and Valiant came together, like this is like a forever keeper for him. And so yeah, I think he definitely loves this kind of historic issue as much as we do. And yeah, there's this page that has a few color guides floating around as well. And then what happened here? Back to advertising. I remember these advertisements. This was floating around somewhere as well, and someone picked it up really quickly. But I really wish I got my hands on this page.
Yeah, I've got a page from Deathmate Red. It's got Prophet on it, which is a Rob Liefeld character. Harbinger 25. That's a story, a book I'd like to get a page out of. Just a great story as Sting and Harada face off.
I remember this. They go all out, right? Like, yeah, that was great. Was it sad? Did someone die?
So Harada goes into a coma, and Sting walks off, presumably having forever lost his powers. And so, yeah, and actually is kind of a repeated storyline in Rise Zero, both of them being much older. Because, Rise Zero was basically the future told out. So you knew that, I wish they were still there.
Which page was this, Porter's High? The one that he had, which page did he talk about earlier? Did I miss it?
I don't know. The ad on eBay for $700. But yeah, so the Rise Zero basically laid the groundwork for the next 1,000 so odd years for Valiant. So that meant that Shadow Man was going to die in 1999. And so the last issue of Shadow Man leaves you with the cliffhanger. Did he really die or did he not? But yeah, so Rise Zero is also the first appearance of Bloodshot. Oh, here he is. He heard Valiant. There you go.
Brian Wells. We were just talking about you earlier. I don't think we've met yet, but Jason did mention you, and can I say this is probably top three design covers. Like,
And you know that's the
ever.
Punisher, right?
What do you mean that's the Punisher? I didn't know about. What do you mean it's
That's
the Punisher?
Daymers can correct me if I'm wrong, and I think he was actually maybe the one that had reminded me or told me about that. Um, but yeah, so basically it's just Punisher with the sword and the bloodshot deal.
What? I didn't know
It's
that.
Mike. It's a Mike Zett cover.
So good, man. This is so well done. And
It's
it's such
one
a
of those things that simplicity
yeah.
is better.
Yeah,
And
and I think up to this point, like I think early Rye covers were always like very always felt a little vintage for some reason. Like
yeah,
felt like classic comic books. But this one really like kind of like turned him into like a triple A character just through this cover. Talking about covers, Mr. Jim Lee himself got the
yep.
heart. There's a story behind this too, right? Didn't he like trade the cover for something?
Well, Bob, I heard it differently from one person, then Bob said it told a different story. So who knows which one's what, right? But supposedly there was something to be traded out. So, the other thing with the rye, so multiple ryes die over time, right? And they're replaced by a different rye. The difference between the rye from Rye and the Future Force is that he's not a copy of Bloodshot. He's actually got the blood of heroes in him.
So cool. That's such a that's not
Because
tricky. That's not
because
tricky.
the Japan, what they call her, mother, whatever, the robot to keep, because he had the ability to mind lock, right? Which is something you don't want a robot. A robot doesn't want you to have.
Yeah.
So they lock up the blood of heroes and they make a copycat to guard it, which was Rai. But then when the last Rai died fighting Mother God and Japan falls, they go and actually get the blood of heroes and
So cool.
and uses it. That ad for Shadow Man and Aerosmith, that'd be another cool book to get something out of.
This is cool too. So, I mean, one of the things that people don't know is the manager or the publisher Steve was the manager for Aerosmith.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah, and so I guess what used to happen, and I only learned this story a couple weeks ago. We hosted a signing event for Sean, and I remember we were driving away, and it was like a 2 hour signing event, but we were there for like 4 hours. And I was telling Sean, like, man, like you and Daniel signed so many books. I'm exhausted just watching you guys. And he's, oh, well, Steve used to like guess when Aerosmith wasn't on tour, he'll put us on their tour bus. And then Bernard and I would basically be on the road for like a month. And they'll do 3 of those signings a day. So they'll arrive somewhere from like 10 to 12, sign for 2 hours, have lunch, and then back on the bus, they go to the next location. Then they'll sign from like 3 to 5, and then they get back on the bus. They go to the next location. Then they'll sign from like 8 to 10, and they'll sleep on the bus to the next location. So I didn't know this, but yeah, it was a big music manager that was behind Valiant, and I felt like that's kind of why there was like a bit of a rock star energy when it comes to the talent and how they were exposed to folks. But yeah, it's great.
So Brian Wells, fun fact here, that he became pen pals with Bob Hall
Nice.
back in the 90s and was the only person to write a letter on the final issue of Shadow Man, which I knew that he's got several letters, editorial letters in the back of the book for like the Acclaim days.
So cool.
Yeah, so I think Troublemakers was one of the titles. Fabian Nicieza. I should have asked him the other day when I seen him, like, what were you thinking back then? But he was just doing his job.
This was repurposed from a cover, I think Bloodshot 3, right? They use it as an ad. So I love this. We should definitely have a whole conversation about, Dr. Mirage and get Bernard on here as well. And even Bob, I mean, it's a Bernard and Bob thing. Because, recently I think Bob had a Taiwan clip on, like, where he visited Taiwan on Comic Art Cast, and then comic art fans, and Bernard took him around and had a signing event, and it was really cool because I always heard like Bernard's side of it, that he sees Bob as like like a second father, and so Bob actually did say that. So he's like my adopted son, and so it was really cool just to like see that synergy. But I remember when Bob created Dr. Mirage, he invited Bernard to be a co-creator and be part of this. And Bernard's like, all right, I'll do it, but he has to be Asian. And so he gave him that wish. And, this was, I don't know, probably one of the first Asian American superheroes or characters
Well,
within the
certainly,
context
yeah.
of Valiant. Yeah.
Well, and there's an issue where he figures out how to touch her, so it's very reminiscent of the Patrick Swayze movie Ghost.
Ghost is really
And,
cool.
yeah.
I love this. It was a very, like, for me, like, probably outside of like the ethnic thing, it was more about like the romantic side of
Yeah.
things. And I feel like it was different than what's out there. And they did a really good job with that. And again, a freaking Wildcats advertisement was so awesome. Like, I love how the indies like backed each other up back then, Ooh, look at these.
Yeah.
Who was this?
Those are some pages I'd like to, like that one with Shaft and Bloodshot on, and even Grifter and Shadow Man.
Wow. So it's
That's Liefeld.
Rob Liefeld, penciler, and then Bob Layton and Danny Mickey and Dan Panosian inkers. So 3 inkers. Dude, I want one of these pages. Yo, who has this one? Bananas. Supreme. Wow. Man, I'm going to go through and reread all these. And there's just something really special about, flipping through these pages. Because I mostly read digitally now.
Okay.
But look at this. Mark
Texera.
Texera. Yeah, on Union advertising and I guess this is a Valiant Image crossover, so it makes sense.
Yeah.
Youngblood, Strike File, Red, White, and Blood. Wait, Red, White, and Blood. Did that come from Image first, or was that always a Marvel thing?
I don't know.
Yeah, I felt like that was like there's a Black, White, and Blood. Sorry.
Oh yeah, you talking about the most recently? Yeah.
Yeah, all the kind of Wolverine or Deadpool.
Deathmate Black, first appearance of Gen 13. So.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
I forgot about that. And this one had some scheduling issues. No, I don't believe it came out in August.
No, that's what I'm. Yeah, the ones that had more Image stuff in it, they were always late, and that was the sad part about it. But yeah, because I mean, you talking about some killer art on those storylines, killer art.
Yeah,
Brian Wells said he had 27 letters. Wow.
Dang, Brian. I wish I just was. It's weird. It never crossed my mind as something I could actually do and like write letters and send them out. But, in hindsight, it would have been so cool to get those in there.
Well, talking about Deathmate, I have 2 pages. One with Ivar, the first page of Deathmate Yellow. So the title page that has Ivar, the Time Walker, and Armstrong on it.
All right. Speaking of pages, are we gonna do some show and tell? Do we have time? It's
yeah. Let's because I only have a couple of things to show that I just got recently.
Okay, me too.
So yeah, go ahead.
You want to do the honors?
No. Okay. All right. So for those that I have the Book of the Geomancer here, and this is something I tried to get 1 or 2 of at every con, and everybody tries to upstage the last artist, which is a great thing about a sketchbook.
So good.
And so, and all of them with these pages, they're like, what in the world medium am I going to use? So this past time at Baltimore, I got Sean Chin, we talked about earlier, to do a spy lock from Ryan the Future Force right there.
So good.
And then we got Tom Rainey to do Archer and Armstrong.
Nice. Wow. Very detailed. Was that an overnight one like Sean's?
I'm sorry?
Was that overnight commission or did he do it at the con?
Yeah, it was overnight. I left it. No, it wasn't overnight. I left it early in the day and picked it up late. But yeah, he drew on the series more recently. So
nice.
Appreciate Damaris for stopping by. And
thanks, Damaris.
I was able to go through my art pages recently and sort out the VH1 stuff as opposed to the newer stuff.
Okay.
And put the pages in order. And there's the first page to issue 2 right there.
What? Oh my gosh. We're gonna have to reserve some time for like a deep dive.
Or those right there.
Yo, you have that page? That's a great Ixo page.
Yeah, it was on my comic shop. I mean, it went for crazy low money, I thought, but I wasn't going to complain about it.
That's a great page.
So recently, I was able to do a deal with Anthony and some other pickups, and picked up the last page to this book, which goes into the chaos effect. Right there.
Woo!
So there, you see them dumping the bodies and stuff.
That's so cool. Can you remind me what the chaos effect was? I got the 2 books here. I got the Alpha and Omega.
So something happened. Something happened in the magical realms, which through like the dark magic. So it threw like Shadow Man, Doctor Mirage, all those guys, threw them into a tizzy. But it actually brought Magnus back to the present, whereas he had been in the past. So like some weird stuff like converged and happened. But yeah, it was it didn't last actually very long. So
and do you remember timing wise? Was that before Unity, after Unity?
After what now?
Was it after Unity or was it before Unity?
Oh yeah, it was after Unity. Yeah.
After Unity. Okay, cool.
Yeah, and yeah, Brian Wells says necromancer stuff.
So only 6 months, Jason.
He's not too far from that, but
Wait, you've only been collecting for 6 months?
No, I've been collecting longer than 6 months, but I haven't.
Good. Damn, you're like
original art that long. So this is the page that I got from Anthony. So at one point, the aliens poison the exo armor, and the exo armor dies. So Eric doesn't know what to do. Solar finds another exo seed, but it has to be made. It has to be. Yeah, it's since after COVID. Yeah. I started collecting art like 2 years ago. Yeah, one of the first art pieces I've got in my collection is a color guide that Scott sent me from Shadow Man. So anyway, this is where Paul says, "Hey, I'm fixing to die anyway. I'll sacrifice myself to be the next exo seed so that you can continue to fight crime." And then, of course, already had this page right here where the
dude, those are great pages. I remember like who was the artist on those?
Rick Levins.
Okay, those are great pages. I remember that moment too because it says a lot about like Valiant's character arcs. Because remember, like he was kind of a jerk, right? Right. He was kind of a jerk. He was shady. He was kind of like, always trying to like get away with stuff. And then for him to then eventually sacrifice himself for Eric, man, like what a way to go. That was like a very heart-wrenching moment for sure.
Well, and the weird thing about that, so for a few issues, he actually has his personality in the exosuit, and then that kind of fizzles out. Well, they later on picked that thought process up late in the Robert Venditti run, or was it in the Matt Kent run? But they picked it up where the suit is actually sentient and will talk back to Eric, similar to what we're used to with Iron Man talking back with his AI, right? But the suit is actually alive. Was a bit of a thought taken that they brought forward, but it only lasts for a couple issues in the VH1 stuff.
Yeah, it's super cool though. And Stingray, what's Valiant? A Valiant. We're doing this for you, man. So you better rewind and watch because there's a lot of stuff that we covered today. And then Marcus asked, like, what's a favorite piece you own? We should do that at the next one. Like maybe share some of our favorite piece. Yeah. And you could preview it. Like, do you have one that comes to mind right away?
Well, I'll grab. I don't know if this qualifies as my favorite piece in of itself, but what it represents. How about that?
Whoa! What the heck? Who made that?
So
no.
Kyle Willis is a comic book artist, and of course, we know that this is an homage to Bloodshot Zero, right? Or Rise Zero, rather. And look at the word bubbles that's on here.
Oh, I was wondering what that was. I thought it was like splatters or something.
Those are from Rye Comics. Those are,
What?
so he literally cut those out of various different Rye Comics to put this on here. So obviously I love the cover, but there's no way whoever owns this is not going to let it go, and certainly not let it go in my budget.
Yeah.
So when I saw this pop up, this is the first since the relaunch of Alien actually publishing Valiant comics.
Mm.
This was the first store exclusive, and the first store exclusive is done by a comic book store that's 2 hours from my house. And so the guy was a huge Valiant fan. And so the artist, Kyle Willis, comes up from Florida and says, "Hey, I'm going to have this there with me at the store signing." I said, "Man, that's awesome. What do you want for it?" And he told me. And when he told me what he wanted for it, and he said half of it's going to cancer, American Cancer Society,
Wow, that's
and
cool.
I'll donate it in your name or somebody's name you want me to donate it
Cool.
into. And so I bought it, and I picked it up from him at the store. So this is the first store exclusive. It was for Rye, number one.
Nice.
And yeah, so it's a lot of different various things for it. Again, I don't know. It just means a lot. It's on a canvas board. There's Kyle's signature right there.
That's really cool. Wait, so did they publish it with all the text on there?
You can't see the word. You can tell there's a disruption in the color. Yeah. It's not a pure white.
Yeah,
but it's not. You can't read it on the comic.
Is there a reason why they didn't just publish the original versus they kind of published with this one? Was there some kind of copyright issues?
Yeah, I don't know if they just wanted something a little bit different.
Yeah, interesting.
Or not.
Because as we're talking too, I mean, Mike Zeck did this, so I also wonder, like what the line art looks like, right? Because you don't know. It could be just a
largely
line,
a snap.
just a character. Yeah, so it could. Like you don't know like what the original art looks like, so I'm super curious myself. All right, so I should share as well. So
yes, please.
These literally just arrived 2 days ago, and they're very random, but I'm super excited to have them. I guess I'll go with this guy first. So I don't even know where it's from. Solar 27, page 14, Peter Grawl, and this is basically. Yep. Like I said, like I don't have the best memory when it comes to like some of these storylines, but I really remember the splash. I remember, I just remember like, was it like a geomancer with Solar?
That guy on the cover, he's on the cover. A very similar scene, not all the background imagery, but just him like offering up in front of the fire with Solar just sitting there. Did you pick that up from Jimmy?
The other Brian I was telling you about. There's another Brian that has a thing called. I'll send you the link later. But there's a few other things up as well. But this was just up, and I just had to grab it. And I was like, oh my! I totally remember this, and it's kind of cool. I mean, it's a little dirty. I think there's like the word bubbles that all fell off. I guess.
Yeah.
There's all the.
I hate that. I love it when the word bubbles are still there.
Me too. It's the best.
Yeah, Dan Moeller, another Valiant guy in the house. Bring them all in here.
Yo, Dan Moeller.
And then Brian Wells as the Destroyer. Yeah.
So that's one.
And I'm sure Marcus, with the sharp eye that he has for Mannix, noticed your Mannix to your right.
Yeah, there's my Mannix Unity recreation, which was freaking awesome. I literally had to like move some stuff. I literally sold art just to make space for my Mannix recreations. This second one is page 20, which was kind of cool because I pulled the book out. Sorry, I'm so messy. I'm not prepared.
So Marcus, I think, asked, do they have a line of Valiant statues? There's a couple that are out there. It's not like obviously as deep as what Marvel or DC are.
I don't remember who this character is that Rye is fighting up against, but this is a page from Rye number 2.
Yeah, that's the sticky guy, the porcupine guy. Yeah.
Porcupine guy. Yeah, it's kind of cool. I mean,
Yeah.
this was like,
Joe St. Pierre.
yep, St. Pierre checks off a box for me. So I always wanted like an early rye page. And then this one actually is very meaningful to me because I always bug Bernard about gave me some Dr. Mirage art. And
Oh
I got a
wow.
piece from issue 2, this is page 10. And I remember this moment. Like, it's kind of where all these like
Uh-huh.
zombies are coming out, and it's almost like, Moses crossing the Red Sea kind of thing. And I always remember this moment. So these were 3 like kind of fun pickups for me recently.
Yeah,
And
he was just kind of learning to utilize his that necromantic energy that he
yeah.
had to do stuff like that. And Dan Moeller says ice spike. It might be. I just said that about porcupine because that's what he reminds me of.
Yeah, I guess so. I would take Dan's word for it because I was considering one of the experts in the space.
And Marcus, I do have some Himbeck Valiant cards. Yes. Mm-hmm.
So those are the 3 recent pickups. Man, it's been fun, man. I mean, just going through like this world and kind of reopening this can of worms again. I think in person we talk about this stuff a lot, but just having this conversation to follow up has been awesome.
Yeah. Brian says Chang still have all of his Valiant art.
Got it. Okay. No, it makes sense. He talks about it, and when I ask him about it, he just doesn't answer. But he's a good friend, but it doesn't sound like he wants to let go of any of it. So it is what it is.
Yeah.
And totally respect, because Walt Simonson holds on to everything, and same for Bernard. And from what I hear, someone said Walt eventually just wants to donate it to like a museum or something.
Yeah, I think Stan Sakai is doing something very similar with a lot of most of his stuff. Yeah, Brian says no, he does. I guess he's talking about the chain thing. I don't know.
To the PC. What does that mean? I don't know what Valiant art I still want to add to the PC.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because Scott's trying to like focus himself more like Jonah Hex and Spectre art, and Bunny Mask, which he already owns most of the Bunny Mask stuff. But the thing with the Valiant stuff is that, again, you didn't have to start off like going back through the handbooks to try to catch up on all the missed storylines because you're not eternal. If you were of a certain age, you remember the first issue coming out and we're able to catch it from there. The art, the stories, and then going forward in the day that we live in, where everything's just like here at a couple of clicks of your fingertips, especially on the YouTubes. It's not something you hear about every day. You hear nothing wrong. I collect X-Men and Hulk and all that kind of stuff too. But you see the Dale Keown Pitt image right here above my shoulder. But it's not something you hear about all the time. So to be able to talk about the stories and he says, yeah, Brian says, yeah, Bernard doesn't sell his art. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's fun to talk about and reminisce, and people like Stingray and others, if there's a good jumping on point, because though it's a conjoined universe, it doesn't have to be. I mean, you'll see people like even like that EXO, come
running through the wall. That's the best.
But you'll have stuff like that, and then that kind of leads you off into another thing if you want to. But like Archer and Armstrong, you mentioned earlier, largely could be by itself. Like if you just want to read Archer and Armstrong, not really get into the bigger parts of the Valiant universe, largely you can do it. So
I think there's no one start off point, but kind of what you mentioned earlier is if you want to just start earlier, start with Magnus, Solar, and maybe Torok as a spinoff. Harbinger, I thought, was a good kind of line to kick off as well, because that was one of the earlier titles. And I agree. I think with Eternal Warrior, that's been a fun one, like the whole Highlander side of things. But yeah, I mean, we're trying to shoot for an hour. We're a little bit over, but I think I had so much fun with this. I think we need to do it again soon.
Yeah, and it'd be great to get some of these other guys, some of them here in the chat, to even just talk about a story that meant something to them, show off some Valiant art, and go from there.
All right, guys, everyone in the chat, you heard it here first. We'll probably reach out to you and get you guys on the calendar. I think it'd be super fun just to dive into our personal experiences and kind of what we're into when it comes to Valiant. And then yeah, I think Zero or Eternal War 1, those were first Valiant books I got. Yeah. So you and I are similar Hoarder side for sure. Brian's up to it any time, so I guess with that said, Jason, what do you think? Any other closing words? I think this was a great kickoff.
Yeah, nothing. I guess it's pretty fitting to say, stay valiant.
Stay valiant. Later, guys.
Peace.